Okay, I'm now live. Now, just thought I'd do a impromptu thing. I'm at the local library where I've got a great background, as you can see. I'm in sort of an outdoor area, so not too many people around. No one viewing, so I will just put a link to this on Facebook. So I won't say very much for a little while. I'm hearing some funny clicking coming from the computer. In fact, it's my own voice. There's some feedback. So I'll just turn the volume down, and hopefully that will get rid of it. And oh, that's right. The reason for the feedback is I opened up another window of myself, and that is why. So, and the reason for me opening up the window is to get a link. So I will just put that on my Facebook, and I'll close the other link down, and then the feedback should be gone. So I've turned down the volume a lot, so it should be a lot less anyway. And okay. So we've got 5 people watching, so that's good. Well, what have I been doing? Well, there was a big ARRL DX contest thing. I got up early and went down, got on the bike, went down to the pier, and I had one contact into the States, which is a struggle. Anyway, I decided to do other things. More about that later. In the meantime, we've got a question from Walter. Is there any way to build an SSB filter using several smaller filters to replace a missing monolithic type in a radio? Well, an SSB filter, usually it's several crystals, maybe 4 or 5 crystals. So yes, provided that, assuming you mean crystals, not filters, yes, you can make a filter out of several crystals. There's different configurations, lattice, half lattice, ladder type of filter. That's probably the easiest for homebrew construction. But yeah, depends on the frequency though. 8 to 10 megahertz is quite good for SSB filters. You can build them quite easily if you use about 100 picofarad in the capacitors. You might need to fiddle around with the capacitance values a little bit, but you can build a SSB filter with crystals. Now, the issue is if you are replacing with radio, existing radio, and that's a big but, it's got to be a very specific frequency. If it's commercial radio, it will have a particular intermediate frequency, and your crystals will have to be of a suitable frequency. Whereas if it's a home brew rig, you can design for a bit of flexibility, and you can use whatever crystals you have. So, yeah, it's probably harder if it's a commercial rig if you're trying to repair that compared to if you're building from scratch. Now, other questions there, which is great. Thomas, special license other than your amateur license to use an HF beacon for range tests? Well, it depends on what country you're in. And in some countries, like here in Australia, you don't even need an amateur license. If it's a really low power beacon, like a few milliwatts, or even 100 milliwatts on certain frequencies. Here in Australia, we've got a thing called low interference potential devices, and depends on the frequencies. There's a frequency around 13.5 megahertz where I think we can transmit like 100 milliwatts or something. And 100 milliwatts might not sound much, but if you were to transmit using whisper mode with 100 milliwatts, you could put out a signal all over the world. So yeah, you can achieve some quite amazing ranges. From David, have I tried building or using a double bobtail? That would be fantastic. Now, by double bobtail, I don't know if you mean one that's longer, so it's got more sections, or one with a reflector behind it, which would make it unidirectional. That'd be fantastic antennas. But yeah, they and yes, they would help. But yeah, the more stuff you take, the more harder it is, and it takes longer to put up. Hello to VK3AJK Alan, good that you're watching, and we're up to 10. Hello to Lucas PY2NQC. Yeah, so yep. As far as Thomas, as far as your HF beacons, depends on your country. FCC in America have Part 15, which is their low power devices. I think in some countries they call them short range devices. Here in Australia, it's low interference potential. So, yep. You may be able, depending on your communications authority, depends on the rules. David, glad you enjoyed the Nano VNA video and FM and CW. Well, it will probably be a future video, but given that, the video I just put up today, or this morning our time, was all about Baofeng receiving AM broadcast. Now, you can also, with a similar principle, receive SSB and CW on 7 megahertz. Now, of course, you will need a beat frequency oscillator for that. But yeah, last night I was receiving DX signals with that. Demo Vegemite as solder flux. Maybe it does work. I don't actually have any Vegemite in the cupboard, so.
Sorry.
So yeah, I can't actually. So I don't think I'll be getting around to that. But if anyone has used Vegemite as a solder flux, then let us know in the comments. FMIK, hello Michael. Have I made a magnetic loop using a JCAR variable capacitor? Yeah, the little transistor radio types. It would work on receive. You'd definitely get a good peak. On transmit, you're going to be having quite a high voltage, and they are low voltage variable capacitors. Maybe if you're running a few milliwatts of whisper, low power, you might just be able to get away with it. But for transmitting, if you can, I'd suggest an NS-based variable capacitor rather than a little JCAR one. Walter is asking about recaps. Some of the capacitor and resistor values don't seem to be available in modern equivalents. Well, some capacitor resistor values, if they're within, say, 10 or 20%, they should be okay. Exception is if they're really critical stuff around tuned circuits. If it's things like decoupling capacitors, then even if you're 50% too high or 50% too small, it probably isn't going to make a lot of difference. Like old capacitor values were like 0.5 of a microfarad. Your modern one will be 0.47. It's really not going to make a lot of difference. You can just put in that. Main thing is that your voltage ratings are okay. Yeah, so yeah, quite a few questions. I bought a Chinese RF amplifier kit for 180 watts and got a maximum of 5 watts, and that blew 5 watts. Hang on, 5 watts input power. So you're getting 5 watts output for 5 watts input. Yeah, well, that doesn't sound very good, does it? Blue, well, those MOSFETs, I'd imagine the bias would be quite tricky. And William, glad W8LV, glad you like the books. Don't forget, speaking of books, there is a if you're starting into amateur radio, then there is Ham Radio Get Started. That's for the American market, Australian run Ham Radio Handbook. But yeah, recommend that book to people interested in getting into amateur radio. It's a beginner's guide, and the Ham Radio Get Started is written for the American market. I have the American call sign. I just need to change one letter. I am also AK3YE. So, I've written it for the American, so that could be handy. Lucas, 160 meter antenna question. How do you build portable and shorted? Looking for end-fed feed antenna. I don't understand your question. But yeah, for 160 meters, something like a top-loaded vertical would be okay if you don't have much space. I've called it the shoddy tenor. There's something on my website, VK3YE. From Neil, have I calculated how much sand my FT817 has in it? From WA4CHQ. I haven't, but I do have another 817. I could weigh that and compare it with my existing 817, but that wouldn't work either because the one I use has also got a CW filter in it. And William, glad that you enjoy the discussions from KJ7HWV. And if you've just turned on, and there's 20 of you, so that's great. I'm Peter VK3YE, and I am live right now from my local library. So we've got a nice courtyard here and a beautiful background. I meant to do something, I was going to do something else like writing or whatever, but I thought, well, there's free Wi-Fi here, so why don't I do a live YouTube? So yeah, keep the questions coming. We've had really good mix of questions so far today. As for the time, it's just before 4 p.m. here in Melbourne. So just trying to think of what time it is in other countries. It'll be in the morning in Europe. How do you know how to make a splitter to feed 4 dipoles on 2 meters? I don't know. I'm not into that sort of stuff. Why would you? Is it to try and get an omnidirectional radiation pattern? Most interesting. Hello to George. Kind of air used by the beach. Yeah, all sorts of antennas. Mostly end-fed. 6:44 a.m. in Budapest, so you're just getting up. And 9:45 p.m. in LA, so it's actually a pretty good time, at least for the States. Maybe a bit late for the East Coast, and a bit early for Europe. So, so what I've been doing today, I've been doing some experiments with Whisper at 2 a.m. Brazil. Yeah, not so good. So talking to all the insomniacs in South America. Would you consider building an ultra simple 20 or 40 meter SSB rig? Well, it's barely usable in doing videos. Yeah, that could be quite interesting. The nearest I have to that on 40 meters is a lot easier to build stuff instead of 20 meters. Hello to Aussie Ham Radio. Like for 40 meters, if you have a look at my Beach 40, that's nearest to the, that's double sideband. That's super simple. But I've had a lot of great contacts with it. Radio pushcar, omnidirectional, that would work for circular polarization satellites and that sort of stuff. Might cut out fading. So I can see that. But I think there's various harnesses, and you try and with bits of coax cable or whatever of certain lengths, you need to think about the velocity factor, and I think that's how you can might be able to do all that sort of stuff. VK2 KJJ. How much difference if you signal earthwise in salt water or on sand? I've done a few videos where I've been pedestrian mobile using a vertical on 40 meters, and yet when I walk into the salt water, a big difference when it's making contact with the salt water. But if you would have a counterpoise just above the sand, I think that would be quite effective as well. As far as ultra simple QRP rigs for SSB, getting back to that previous question, the nearest I got to it was a phasing SSB rig. I've done a video previously on that. That was like, I think from memory, 7 transistors, 200 milliwatts output, but it was real SSB phasing. So yeah. Oh, sorry, am I too loud? Yeah, now the what's your portable go-to QRP antenna? Basically 20 meters of wire, bits of on a squid pole. Okay. Yeah, but I do try various antennas like half squares. I sometimes try verticals, that sort of thing. Hello to Aussie Ham Radio. 30 people watching. That's quite a lot. And hello to Trashbag Fashion Lover. Okay. Now, what was I going to talk about? Anyway, you can keep the questions going. It's been great. How can I short an end-fed antenna? I don't understand what you mean. Shorting an end-fed antenna. Yeah, well, an end-fed antenna is just a bit of wire that you feed at the end. And hello to the Smoking Ape. Good to have you watching. Now, people have used antennas. Is it a folded, put an inductor on it? Well, with an inductor, you'd be creating some sort of end loading if you put it near the end, and that could actually work if you're wanting to say, I've used like a shortened half-wave vertical on 40 meters. If you don't have enough room to put in 20 meters of wire, or have 20 meters of wire, you could make it say 12 meters long. You can have a coil that's about 2 meters from the end, and then you can have 10 meters, and that 10 meters can be a half wave on 14 megahertz, and then with the coil and the extra bit at the end, it's also effectively a shortened half wave on 7 megahertz. Yeah, I've described that in an earlier video, and you can probably hear some sirens, and we are very close to a police station. In fact, the wall of the police station is right there. In fact, if you look, there's a police helicopter there. Yes, it's part of the artwork here. And just in case you're wondering, I'm at my local library, where they've very nicely put out in the courtyard, sort of, it's hard to see, but anyway, sort of a, you can see another one there, sort of a beanbag thing. So yeah, it's very nice. Okay, all right, we've got a meaty question. Can I give a basic explanation of differences between various receivers, direct conversion, regen, and superhead? Hello to Nimrod Diaries, and no worries, enjoy your sleep. Yeah, basically, regenerative receiver, simple receiver that uses, well, it's basically a straight receiver. There's no frequency conversion in a regenerative receiver, but it does use a transistor set up as an amplifier. It uses positive feedback. So, and when you have positive feedback in a amplifier circuit, if you set the feedback level too much, it starts to oscillate. But if you set the feedback a little bit, so there's a little bit of positive feedback, so a bit of the output's coming into the input, it becomes a self-sustaining thing, so it gives you a bit more gain, so you can get good amplification with just one or two transistors with a regenerative receiver. And if you have it lightly oscillating, now a straight regenerative receiver is good for AM receiving. I used them in the early days of radio for AM broadcast stuff. But if you have the receiver oscillating, then it will also tune in CW and single sideband as well. So that's a regenerative receiver, one of the simplest form of receivers, no frequency conversion, except your signal frequency down to audio. Direct conversion, a little bit different. Your detector is normally separate from your local oscillator. Your detector is often could even be diodes, but with a direct conversion, you've got a separate local oscillator on a frequency that is very close to the received frequency that you're tuned to. And there's a beat note, and that's at audio, and you amplify it, and you can pick up CW and SSB on a direct conversion receiver. Not so good for AM. Super heterodyne receiver. That's right. An issue with the regenerative receiver is they're not necessarily all that sensitive. They're not particularly good with strong signals. With a direct conversion receiver, unless you make it a lot more complicated, you have what's called the audio image, which means the selectivity is not so good with a direct conversion receiver. You can have audio filtering, but but you've still got an issue with hearing signals on both sides when you tune. I'll talk about superhet receiver in a moment. There's a question from Robert about converting a Ranger Superstar. So got no idea. There are probably websites that are specific to do with mods for things, but I can't help you on that. Now, superhet receiver, it's a bit more complicated. It is another invention of Edwin Howard Armstrong, whatever his name is. Anyway, that uses frequency conversion. So you are converting the incoming signal with a mixer stage, mixing it with a signal from an RF oscillator, and you are converting it to another RF frequency, and that's called an intermediate frequency. The benefit of that is that you can put in crystal filters, like I was talking about before, and you can get really good selectivity with a superhet receiver. And after then, you then convert it down to audio with a product detector. So you could actually convert a direct conversion receiver into a superhet receiver. So yeah, just by putting a crystal filter in front of the direct conversion receiver and then adding a mixer stage. You might also want a intermediate frequency amplifier, and that's your receiver, converted direct conversion to a superhet. Now, what's my favorite CW key? Well, the one I use most often is one that I made up on a piece of plastic chopping board. So yeah, that is a, you've seen it in quite a few of my videos. It's light, it's robust, and if sand gets in it, it doesn't matter. So yeah, just made out of a spring, bit of aluminium, chopping board. Hello to Scotland, and yep, we've got pretty good weather here. But I'll show you what the sky looks like right now, all blue sky. So yeah, and Razor radios on the Sunshine Coast. Okay, so that might be able to help. 40 meters mobile hustlers try and make yeah. What's the most important thing for mobile on 40 meters? Well, if you're going to have a car-mounted antenna, you are going to have a significant loss of efficiency compared to if you're using a full-sized antenna on 40 meters. So, yeah, you don't have much of a ground size and amount of room for the car. Longer the better, but of course, if you're mobile, then you've got limitations with that. And yeah. So yeah, there's probably various reviews and things on eHam and whatever about portable antennas on 40 meters. And see you to Lucas. Okay. How long have we been going? We've been going for nearly half an hour. I don't intend to be sticking around for too much more. I want to do some other stuff. The library closes at 5. It's just before 4 p.m. here. So yeah, if there's not any, if there's not any more questions, I'll finish it off. And hello to Argentina. How can you translate SNR from whisper reports to predict CW or SSB? Good signals for given band time. And hello to Jennifer from Perth. I know Perth quite a lot, originally a BK6. Translate SNR from whisper reports. Generally speaking, if you are getting reports of like 0 dB on whisper, then you should be able to have CW or SSB contacts. Because I know you're from home on HF, and what antenna I use a G5RB up at about 10 meters in the middle. So yeah, if you get 0 SNR on whisper, a lot of whisper receiving stations are not particularly good. They might have a lot of local noise. So if you've got a DXer in a good location, with a good antenna, good mast, they might hear you, even if your signals aren't particularly good. They might be better at receiving than a whisper station. But generally speaking, I found that I did an experiment a few videos ago. I operated portable QRP 5 watts CW and SSB, and I tried whisper, and I got some 0 dB reports on whisper, and I was able to get into Europe and on CW and SSB. And I have compared CW and SSB, roughly 100 watts CW, 100 watts SSB is like 5 watts of CW, and hello to Derek. So yeah, look for 0 dBm on, or dB on whisper. You should be able to work on CW or SSB, and CW probably being a bit easier. And hello to Liminal in LA. Do you have any new books from Mike? No, not for a while, but there will be some videos new videos coming up. So yeah, the Baofeng series has been really popular. Also, I just recently had a review video of a Haverford squid pole. So there's a special offer now that has been really popular. I think some of the squid poles have sold out, but if you're in Australia, haverford.com.au, check out their squid pole range for portable antenna masts, and discount code VK3YE for a 10% discount, but only they've got a 15% off sale. That's only until tomorrow. So yeah, hello to Toby. Yeah, air scatter on 6 meters. Well, as well as air scatter, why don't you also try meteor scatter? Depends on if there are people playing meteor scatter, but you never know. You can get distance, detect signals of say 1,500 kilometers away. I've done a video on it. Look up meteor scatter 6 meters. 6 meters is probably about the best band for that. Yeah, SNR will vary from location to location. Yeah. Yeah, QRP with the 817 can sometimes be tough. Depends. Like if you want to, working halfway across the world, sometimes that's actually quite easy, but other times it's tough. Short single hop stuff like 1,000 kilometers, that's quite easy. Anyway, if no further questions or comments, I think we'll close. We've been going for nearly half an hour. There's quite a lot of videos coming out in the next few days, so keep an eye on those. Thanks all for watching, and have a good afternoon or evening or morning.